Shalom friends, this is Mime, and in this video I'd like to talk about the power of touch. Now in Judaism there is an observance called Shomer Negiah. And Shomer Negiah means literally guardian of touch. Okay, so someone who is Shomer Negiah is a guardian of touch. And it acknowledges basically the power of touch, the power that God has put into the act of touching. And the practice of Shomer Negiah generally means that one does not touch the opposite sex. Now, it's generally, generally understood that this doesn't apply to one's parents or children or siblings, family member, grandparents, etc. However, this practice is derived from two passages in the Torah. One is from Leviticus 18:6, which says, "None of you shall come near anyone of his own flesh to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord." So basically what that verse is saying is that we should not even come close to having sex with someone who is our family member, okay? His own flesh. That refers to someone who is, close of kin. And then the other verse is Leviticus 18:19. So the first one was Leviticus 18:6, and the second one is in Leviticus 18:19. And the second one says, "Do not come near a woman during her period of uncleanness to uncover her nakedness." So again, it's talking about, not even coming near to a woman. But, the context of both of these is to have sex. Now, back in the days of the temple, it was especially important to not even touch because, sibling or not, even if you're touching someone that is allowed, if a man came into contact with a woman who was on their menstrual period, it would render them spiritually unclean, which simply means that they were not able to go to the temple to, partake in the temple services unless they go through a special ritual. And, we don't have the means to go through that ritual today, but regardless, as Jews, we still keep the principles of these commandments. Now, the Siftei Kohen in the 17th century explains that the kind of hugging and kissing that is prohibited is the kind prohibited by Torah is the kind that is associated with intercourse. So, there are several places in the Talmud where the Talmudic rabbis hug and kiss their daughters and sisters, and this is permissible. But when it comes to the kind of hugging and kissing that is only reserved for marital relations or sexual relations, that is the kind of touch that is prohibited by Torah. Now, for the, of course, Orthodox Jews, they'll do more than that. They'll refrain from touch in other ways too, and that can be considered rabbinic. But when it comes to the kind of touch that is prohibited by Torah, that is limited to the kind of touch that is a precursor or a prelude to sex. So a lot of young people and single people, they think that French kissing is harmless, in a relationship. And they think that that's not really crossing a line, that it's okay to, French kiss someone. But, interestingly enough, why should the line be drawn right there, And what I explained to my teenager is that the kind of touch that any kind of touch, just as the Siftei Kohen said, that is a precursor or is associated to sex is part of sex. You know what I mean? Like, all animals have mating rituals, and French kissing is one of the mating rituals that humans partake in before the act of sex. And so, some people ask, well, is French kissing, is that intercourse? Is that sex? And, halakhically, or, legally, according to Jewish law anyways, which is based on the Torah, kissing isn't punishable by death the way, intercourse in terms of, physical intercourse would be punishable by death, if the union is illegal. But still, it's highly questionable and it's highly frowned upon. So I gave my teenagers the analogy of, let's say you sit down and you're having dinner, and let's say you're having like a salad and some meat and some potatoes and some bread, and the question is this piece of bread, is this dinner? And it's like, well, it's part of dinner. It might not be the whole thing. It might not be the main thing. It's just a side dish, but it's still part of dinner. It's the appetizer. It's the precursor to the main, to the main course. Same thing with a piece of lettuce. Is that piece of lettuce from the salad, is that dinner? And it's like, well, yes, it's part of dinner. And so same thing with French kissing. And even, between a man and a woman, even holding hands, that part is all part of the mating ritual of humans. Now, some people think that, some teenagers think, and not just teenagers, but, adults as well, they think that the reason why one should refrain from sex when they are young, or, when they're not prepared yet, is because they don't want to have a baby, if they're not ready to have a baby. But that's really not good enough. That's not the reason, at least, that parents should use, especially if they're religious. It's not the reason that you should give your children, I believe, for saving, sanctifying the marriage relationship, the future marriage relationship, by guarding the touch. Because if all you're worried about is having a baby, there are many things that you can do that will enable you to not have a baby, but that are still very inappropriate. Okay, so it shouldn't be about, you should keep Shomer Negiah, or you should save yourself for marriage because you don't want to have a baby. You can't think that way, because there's all kinds of ways to get around having a baby. Even if it doesn't, there's lots of ways, okay? Just even with or without birth control, there's many things that are inappropriate. And it's our job as God's people, as Jews, to bring heaven down to earth and, sanctify that which God has sanctified. Keep it. When God says something is holy, it's our job to keep it holy by our actions. When he says the Shabbat is special, we keep it special through our actions. So when he says that the marriage bed, is holy, that a marriage covenant is special, it's up to us whether we keep it that way or not for ourselves. Now, some people think, that, oh, yes, we talked about marriage, we plan to get married, but here's the thing: words are vain. words are meaningless. And every year on Yom Kippur, we even ask, God to annul all of our vows, do we not, as Jews? So we can't wait for, we can't rely on hope and promises. The thing that is, at least in Judaism, is the most important proof for a wedding or for a marriage is the ketubah. And it's a legal contract. It's a promise to pay. It's a promise to support a wife, or a husband to support a wife financially, maritally, with marital relations. And it's something that's binding, and it's something that is communal. Here's the thing, there's some people that think that they can just do something and they're married, like they can just have sex and that means they're married. Well, that's not true, because men would lie with prostitutes. That didn't make them married. There was no intent to support that person. Okay, it was just a financial transaction for sexual relations. So it's not the act of sex that makes a marriage a marriage. The act of sex is like one of the prizes of marriage, but it's not a marriage in and of itself. A marriage is so much more. Now, the ketubah, or the marriage contract, it acts as physical proof. It's a piece of paper that you can show to the whole entire world, and there's witnesses. And so that means that a marriage, in a godly marriage, in a Jewish marriage, there's accountability. It's not something that you do in secret. And I know a lot of people, they will, they'll enter a marriage in that way. They'll do it in secret. And they'll think that it's okay, when in reality that's not the ideal. If you're establishing something that is good, why would you not want the whole world to know about it? Why should you be ashamed of it? Why should you hide it from anyone? Especially, your community, your family of faith. There's no reason, unless there's something wrong, with the union. So you have to think about, your actions, and remember that, things that are good, they should have no reason to be ashamed of the light. Now, if someone is a guardian of the touch until they're married, what that means is that you can more likely guarantee that the person that you're marrying is connecting with you and is marrying you, because you are connecting on a mental and spiritual level. And the mental and spiritual level, those levels are harder to connect with other people than the physical, and that's evident because a man can easily have sex with a prostitute. It's very mechanical, especially for men to have sex. But a man can't just marry any woman. He wouldn't just marry any prostitute, most men, godly or not godly, they want to marry someone who they can connect with on a mental or spiritual level, not just on a physical level. Even though they can have sex with someone on purely a physical level. Marriage material is when you can connect with that person deeper than just physical. And because the mental and spiritual is harder to connect, that's why we need to focus on that first when determining a mate. So I just wanted to encourage everyone here to consider Shomer Negiah, to consider being a guardian of touch. And even if you don't keep it in an orthodox way, not touching the opposite sex at all, at least still understand that, and I know that there are both adults as well as, there's older adults and young adults and teenagers who all need to hear this. That when we guard the touch, especially the kind of touch that is, part of the marital or sexual act, and to easily to easily distinguish between, is it part of that kind of touch, or is it the kind of touch that is okay? Think about this. If a married person, if there were two people that were married, and the woman touched another man, and I'm talking about just secular people, right? If a woman shook a man's hand, is that part of the sexual relations? Is that something that her husband would divorce her over? No. Or if she kissed a relative on the cheek, is that something that her husband would divorce her over? No. But what if she French kissed someone? That's something that should be reserved for the marriage covenant. And so that is certainly too far. I believe, even if you don't keep Shomer, even if you don't keep Shomer Negiah, and even if you're not Jewish, it's if you believe in God, if you believe in the marriage covenant, it's still a part of that sanctified marital act, that kind of intimacy that only a man or woman is supposed to share together. So I'd like to encourage you, whether you're Jewish or not, to consider Shomer Negiah at least on some level, whether it be, the full strict not touching the opposite sex at all, or at least, refraining from anything that would not be allowed for a married person to do with, someone of the opposite sex who she's not married to, or who he's not married to. And remember, when we are Shomer Negiah, we're not really just guardians of touch. What we're really guarding is the marriage covenant. And that marriage covenant is something that God gave to all humankind, not just to Jews. He gave it to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This is for everyone. We should guard the touch. This is the kind of thing that, the nations should say to Israel. Your laws and your ways are so wonderful. There's so much wisdom in Shomer Negiah and in guarding the touch. And really, there are both religious Jews and Christians who keep Shomer Negiah to a certain degree. There are a lot of, very conservative Christians. They might hold hands, but they, there's a lot of Christians that will save the kiss. They'll save the first kiss for when they're married. And that's also Shomer Negiah, even though it's not to the same level as strict Orthodox Jews. It's still Shomer Negiah, the heart of it, at least, where they're guarding the sexual, intimate kind of touch until marriage. Now, why did God make the marriage covenant sanctified? Why did he sanctify the marriage covenant? Why is it so holy? Well, I believe that the marriage covenant is holy between a man and a woman because, partly at least, because it's reflective of the marriage covenant that God describes between himself and the people of Israel. It talks about how God is the husband and the people of Israel are the bride, and that there is this future marriage that's supposed to take place. Of course, there's language that talks about how, God is already married to Israel, but there's also language that talks about a future, future marriage, a future wedding. And we're supposed to be keeping ourselves holy at this time. As a people, we're supposed to be abstaining from, worshiping other gods and doing things that would not please him right now, even before we are, married, quote unquote, to the Creator at that future time. And so when we apply that to human marriage and the human marriage covenant, what we're doing is we're enacting something heavenly and something prophetic through our own lives and through our actions. So I pray that we as the people of God would keep Shomer Negiah, Jew or not, to some level, and not only keep it ourselves, but remember to pass it on to our children. Because remember, God chose Abraham because he knew that Abraham would pass on to his children and command his children after him to keep God's commandments and statutes and judgments. So may we reflect heaven in everything we do and sanctify Shabbat, sanctify, our diet through kashrut, and also sanctify marriage through Shomer Negiah. Thank you. Shalom.